This next individual, and I'm not going to laugh, I promise, Shannon, I'm not going to laugh. But I was talking with him before everybody started coming in today. And when they were talking about liberty, there's a whole notion that, look, what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong. And it doesn't matter if you have an R in front of your name or a D in front of your name or an I or whatever. We're common sense folks, individuals capable of thinking for ourselves, and we can determine what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong. And this next individual decided that, you know what, I am going to become a part of this process, and I'm going to change it from the inside instead of from the outside. And he's a state committee man for the Oklahoma Republican Party. And a few weeks ago, Senator Rand Paul said, you know what's wrong with the party? We need more folks with facial hair. We need more folks with tattoos. We need more folks with some piercings. We need some young blood in this, because a lot of those are very liberty-oriented. They know what's right is right, what's wrong is wrong. And every time Senator Rand Paul would do this next gentleman would think, oh, he's introducing me. And I'm sorry, TC, I'm not Senator Rand Paul. But, ladies and gentlemen, this is the upstart of the new liberty part of the Republican Party in the state of Oklahoma, and this is one of the leaders of it, T.C. Ryan. Got you, didn't I?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Howard. Thank you. Okay, well, you know what? First off, I'd like to start off with thanking everybody that's here today. Because for you guys to be in here so long and inside when it's so nice outside, it really shows where your heart is. That you're willing to make the sacrifice to change the area in which you live. So please give yourselves a round of applause real quick. I would also like to take a minute to thank Amanda Miller and the entire Day of Resistance crew. This is a great event, and I know where they stand on these issues, and you know, giving all these organizations the ability to come out here and talk to you guys one-on-one, I mean, that really is just, it's a treat for these kinds of events. So please thank the Day of Resistance crew as well. You know, Samantha and I have recently been enthralled with the Netflix series House of Cards. I know Matthew Vermillion back there mentioned it earlier, but has anybody here seen House of Cards? Okay, so I'm not gonna tell you the, one person. I'm not gonna give away the plot of the series, but the essence of the show is the ruthlessness of politics, specifically with the main character, Frank Underwood. Through the eyes of Underwood, we are shown a Washington in which mortal men consumed with the desire of power and control seek those goals without hesitation, with the type of manipulation that it encourages and condones. Through a fictional show, we are shown a truer Washington than that in which we are accustomed to seeing on the nightly news. It's unromantic, it's deceitful, and it's dirty. You see, we have been willfully misled. We've been misdirected. We've been hoodwinked. We've been bamboozled. We've been misinformed. We've been lied to into believing that Washington is the center of that in which we must look to for guidance. Just as Toto pulled the curtain back to expose the wizard, so too does Kevin Spacey pull back the curtain to expose Washington. It's just a little bit better acting with him. I say this to say Washington is not and will not fix the problems that we face as a people or as a nation. We've heard today just but a few of the transgressions of the federal government has committed against us and our Constitution. NSA spying of innocent American citizens, unconstitutional intervention of the market through the Affordable Care Act, aka Obamacare, and Second Amendment infringements, just to name a few. I could go on about the injustices committed in the name of the war on terror, or in the name of the war on drugs, or in the name of the war on whatever else they decide to declare war on. But I'd like to talk to you about the steps, the direct action we can all take as individuals in this process of reclaiming our Austrian economist Murray Rothbard once said, "Rights may be universal, but their enforcement must be local." Many claim that Washington is where we should look to in order to place our country on the right track. And while I agree that the national scene may be one avenue to take, and I just don't believe that it is necessarily the most productive. At this time anyway. And it should not consume the majority of our time or energy. Don't misunderstand me. Having Jim Bridenstine in Washington has been a real treat, and him pursuing to abolish the IRS is commendable and should be encouraged. You know, what Jim is doing up there is what we should expect of all of our Oklahoma members. This upcoming open Senate seat may afford the people of Oklahoma to send, if chosen wisely, a voice of reason in the wilderness. But if we are to see true and lasting change, if we are to see an expansion of liberty unlike the likes we have ever seen before, then we must take care of our own house first. We must be willing to lay a sound foundation in Oklahoma in order to be the example not only for Washington, but for the rest of the country. What would a strong foundation look like? Well, I believe that we have a unique opportunity in Oklahoma to eventually become the freest state in the Union. I believe that because of events like this and people like you who are willing to take the time out of their day to say, maybe there is something that we can do. So a foundation of freedom for me would include abolishing the state income tax. This should be extremely easy in a red state. The state income tax is nothing more than a penalty on work. And any politician who does not actively work towards abolishing this penalty is saying they inherently have a right to the fruits of your labors. And this is wrong. Reducing regulations, fees, fines, and licenses for every person in every industry should be an aim to lay this foundation of freedom. Too often, politicians have interjected themselves in the affairs of the market, proclaiming that they are somehow the great stimulator of the economy and creator of jobs. They are wrong. If we want to see real growth in Oklahoma, then we must reduce the influence of the government in the market. Reducing corporate welfare, handouts, bailouts will encourage the market to make corrections that will ultimately be to the benefit of the consumer. Cronyism is alive and well in Oklahoma, and even in Tulsa County. And it's definitely not a left or a right issue. But I believe that with your help, we can return to a free market economy in Oklahoma. I also believe part of this foundation would be to reform the prison industry and mandatory minimums. Oklahoma has the highest prison population of women in America. This is unacceptable. There are many steps that we as a people need to take in order to truly reform our society that have nothing to do with politics. But the most rational place to start is within our laws. Mandatory minimums are nothing more than a lack of common sense within our justice system. And it must be addressed. Often, mandatory sentencing encourages the incarceration of nonviolent offenders, with an increase, which increases the burden of debt on all of us, without really addressing any of the issues. Another area I believe that we need to focus on, and Jenny White and Rope does a fantastic job of, is returning education back to a true local level. Common Core must be stopped. But government control of education did not start with Common Core, nor will it stop with Common Core, or when Common Core is defeated. Throughout history, leaders of nations kept their people down by keeping them uneducated. Today, our government keeps us down by being the ones who do the educating. This needs to end. I think one of the biggest steps in the fight to restoring our republic is to regain that control of the education of your children. When I say reign in control, I mean from the feds and from the state. So, how do we begin to lay this foundation of freedom? I believe there are two primary ways in which to accomplish this, with the first being political action. Political action looks differently to different people. Not everybody needs to get up and speak in front of crowds. Not everybody needs to create a new organization or group, or attend meetings, or set up agendas. But if I had to pick the first most basic step you could take towards your newfound political involvement, it would be to find out who your legislator is. Senator Nathan Dahm touched a little bit on this. Who's your state representative? Who's your state senator? Who's your city councilor? Who's your county commissioner? Knowing who works for you is a first step in knowing if they actually work for you or not. Politicians have grown accustomed to only seeing or engaging with their own or those who are paid to engage them. Society has placed such a stigma on even talking about politics or politicians that we sometimes forget they exist. But as I'm sure all of you are aware, they do. When you look at your paycheck, you can tell they do. Find out who represents you and follow what they do. And I've got a couple of questions here that I always like to ask politicians. And I actually stole this from Barry Goldwater, so see if you recognize it. The first is, will you undertake to promote welfare? Is your aim to pass laws or to repeal them? Is your purpose to create new programs or to cancel old ones that do violence to the Constitution or have failed their purpose, or that impose on the people an unwarranted financial burden? Will you attempt to discover whether legislation is needed before you first determine whether it is constitutionally permissible? Those are good questions to ask any level of government, the politicians on any level of government. So thank Barry Goldwater for that. The thing to remember about politicians is that they want your vote. Their livelihood depends on re-election. So the more we have contact with them, the more we are paying attention to the way they vote, the more inclined they will be to vote with the people. The second step is to find a group or organization that fits you and get involved. All those tables back there are filled with people who have taken the time to do the research. Get involved in one of them. Before you leave here today, go back there, sign up on their lists, get their emails, find out when their meetings are held, and join them. Getting involved with local activist groups not only helps you to grow your understanding of the issues, but it will also embolden your own individual activism. There is power in numbers. So please, go back there and check them out. The third step to political action is investment. Whether it be time or money or your abilities, in order to expand liberty and contract government, we need you to invest in your future. Money. No one likes to talk about it. But the hard truth of the matter is that groups and organizations spend thousands of dollars to take millions of more away from you and your children. So what we need is for all of you to be willing to spend hundreds together to not only retain the money you earn, but to invest in the protection of liberty. If you cannot invest financially, invest of your time. Making phone calls, attending meetings at the Capitol, researching needed material, writing an email or two. Phone calls probably have the most instant impact for action. For some reason, people do not like calling politicians. I'm not sure why. So when they do receive phone calls, they take note of them. The one important thing to remember when making phone calls is that the staff, whomever is answering the phones, they're doing their job. So it's good to be respectful and courteous. And it's good to have those people on your side. Because the more they talk with you, the more they will give your messages to whomever it is they serve. The investment of ability is often overlooked because it is something that you can do naturally or that you already do. What is your trade? What is your hobby? Do you write? Do you blog? Are you an artist? Or maybe a techie? Get creative and invest your abilities towards the cause of liberty. Political action is the most obvious way we can have an impact on regaining our natural rights as individuals. But the second way in which I believe we can have an impact is community. As conservatives, I want the federal and state, as a conservative, I want the federal and state government to take less of my money. As a libertarian, I want the federal and state government to leave me alone. That is easier said than done in today's world. There is such an entangled alliance between the federal and state that it's hard to separate the two from our daily lives. City governments can't run or can't seem to run a city without being subsidized from the federal government. According to the state, education would cease to exist if the feds were out of the picture. Individuals are subsidized from everything from telephones to daycare. This dependence on Washington is not only disturbing to me as someone who advocates for very, very, very limited government, but it also is detrimental to a free society. So what should we do about this culture of dependence? Opt out. Seek alternate routes. Be aware of the enticements of the federal government and walk away. The only way we will regain the power that was taken from us is to take it back. Civil disobedience of unjust laws should be the sign of a true patriot. So let's get a little disobedient. Grow food, not lawns. Dare to live without a permit. Find ways to solve the problems that government intervention into the market has created. I believe the free market is the best mechanism to fight poverty, hunger, and inequality. But if the overlords of government will not only allow for true market exchanges, then we need to be strong enough to stand up and just go ahead and do them. Liberty, freedom, peace, and prosperity can be found if we are willing to be the change that we seek. So I please urge you, find a group, find an organization, and start being the difference in your community that we will need in order to take our country back and restore liberty. Thank you.